Oh, oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. And I actually have a physical book. It's actually a real book that you can buy, and I'll have the link for that in the description. And it's even got my name on it. And did I say that you can buy it? Because you could buy it, and it's a book with words and everything. Be sure that you guys reach out with any comments that you have about the project if you're interested. So let's go ahead and cue that intro. All right, so I'm here with Trevor. We're going to kind of chat a little bit about our project, The Realm of Thraul, which is a collaboration between myself as the artist and Trevor as the writer. So he has completed the first leg of the four parts of this series, and he's got the Spades. So I'm gonna throw it over to you, Trevor, and we'll kind of get to know you a little bit, and then we'll talk about the project and get into some cool specifics.
Sure. So yeah, I guess my background is I'm a relatively new author. I've been writing for a long time, but most authors start counting their official time from when they publish their first book. My first novel came out in October of 2018, so it's been what, a year and a half now, so roughly. So I had my first novel out, and then just a few months after that, I published a collection of short stories, and that's really most of my portfolio. I've got a lot of other scraps and pieces laying all over the place that just need work or polish, or some of them that need to be torn apart and completely reconstructed, which I imagine is very similar to what an artist does. Uh, my
Absolutely.
wife's an my wife's an artist, so I know her studio is full of things that need work or polish. That's sort of my background as far as writing. I'm also a gamer. I'd love to be an artist, but I just don't have the patience to apply that skill set. So I use words to paint pictures. I tend to be better at that than anything else. So that tends to be where my focus lies. I love writing short stories, but long form fiction is also a love of mine. I love reading it. You can see all the books behind me. That's about a third of my library behind me. So it sort of was natural for me to, I picked up books at a very young age. And then that's when I realized that's what I want to do. I want to tell stories. This was sort of huge, actually, to have this opportunity. It sort of came out of a very, I think we're calling it the con that shall not be named. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's an interesting sort of set of events that kind of brought us together. We were at a convention that was it was local for me. It was semi-local for you. I know you're
yep,
you're located in Illinois, right? Are
yep.
you? We were at a meeting point at a convention, and we happened to have a table next to each other, and
Mhm.
we had a lot of time to talk because there was really not much happening there in terms of
Oh,
sales or a crowd. But it was kind of a chance thing. The project is something that I had been thinking about and working on for a really long time. It was just a collection of little notes and sketches and research. And, initially my thing was I'm going to build this world and I'm going to create all the visuals for it. And I am interested in writing, but like you, we kind of are similar in that way. I don't have the time to develop that skill. So we kind
right.
of you pick your lane.
Yeah,
You can be a jack of all trades, but that comes with some sacrifice to
right.
one or the other. So I was working on this thing, and I thought, I'm next to someone who's an author, so I'm just going to go ahead and pitch the project. And
Yeah,
that was the first time I really presented it to anyone. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. And you looked over what I had put down, and you were like, "This looks really cool. I'd really like to be part of it." And then
yeah,
the whole thing was born from that chance encounter.
yeah, definitely. And it was one of those moments where because I was still relatively new and I was already in shock from being there. And I know that the convention didn't go great for us, but one of actually my very first comic book convention was held at the Rosemont. I went to Wizard World back in 2005, And from the minute I walked, I've always been a comic collector since I was a kid. And from the moment I walked in to that convention, I'm like, I want to be here someday. I want to be sitting behind one of these tables talking about my comic book. Cause for a long time I'd love, and I still would, I would still love to write comic books. But I'm like, I want to be there. And I'm not gonna lie, I teared up a bit when we walked in the back door of the Rosemont that first day, and I was hauling my books and all my stuff behind me, and my wife was there. I was like, and I had to stop. I had to stop looking at everybody setting up. There was nobody in the hall, and that was going to be the trend for the rest of the weekend. But I just stopped and I went, oh my God, like I'm here. You know,
Yeah.
it's what 13 years later, and here I'm standing, bringing my stuff in the back door of the Rosemont. And then to have that opportunity present itself, and I was like, the whole time I'm like, keep it in, keep like, don't freak out, don't be that guy, don't freak out, right?
Mm.
But I'm looking at this thing that you're presenting, and I'm like, oh my God, yeah, where do I sign my life away to this project? And part of it was because it was such a cool idea. It was such a unique idea. Um, but also because for me, it's a very similar concept to writing comic books. Now, while it's not individual panels telling a story, but it's still putting story to art.
Yeah.
Which is really is what comic books are, is a collaboration of art and story in a way that interacts with two parts of the reader, the consumer's mind. And I've always loved that aspect of comic books, is you're getting so much out of it, you know, in just 24, you know, colorful pages. So when that came up, I'm like, oh my God, like it sounds like a great project. It's something that I want to do, or it's very similar to something I want to do. And quite frankly, most authors have to beg and pay a lot of money to get somebody to paint their character. And now
Yeah.
I've got an artist that wants me to write I'm like, well, yeah, because here we are sharing this character, and I get to see these characters in, you know, in life in the prints, as well as create their backgrounds and their stories and all this other stuff. So yeah, that was huge. That was so huge.
Yeah. So, just to kind of give a little snapshot of the project, and kind of this is great for us too, because we've gotten to speak a few times, and there's been a lot of emails and back and
Mhm.
forth, but we haven't really been able to sit down and do something like this where we're kind of discussing it and chatting about the project, which
Yeah.
initially I wanted to do a lot more of that, but life just, it gets in, it's so busy, and
Yeah.
everyone's just kind of running around. I mean, this whole situation that we're in right now with the virus and quarantine and staying at home and social distancing, in some ways, it's gotten me to kind of stop and catch my breath the same way that you
Hmm.
had to stop when you went into that convention center, because I just, it's put things into perspective for me where I say, what am I doing? Like, I
Yeah.
am literally running around like my head's chopped off in 20 different directions every day. For what?
Hmm.
What am I doing? It's given the opportunity for artists, creators, writers to kind of just slow down the track, because I
Yeah.
think we have been the type of person I am. I can't speak to where you are, but I would imagine it's probably similar. We have to take things slower, and we're more uh, we think deeper about a lot of things. And
Hmm.
when we're existing in this like fast track world that we've kind of found ourselves in, I feel like I creatively get trampled. Like I'm
Yeah.
just, I feel like I get real irritated when I don't have time to create, and people
Right.
are like, "What's wrong? What's wrong with you? Why are you, why are you acting that way?" And I don't even know how to explain it. And I'm just like,
Right.
"Well, because I haven't been able to sit down and do anything that I wanted to do, or
Yeah.
that I need to do, really." Point being, now we're able to do this thing where we can kind of look at this and talk about it, and nobody's in a hurry. And I'm like, I've got to go, and I've got 5 minutes,
Right.
and I've got to drive somebody to soccer practice, or,
Right.
you know, that's why I think the project has taken so long to kind of
Mhm.
get some forward momentum. Pairing with the us meeting, but it was just sitting around, like I said, for a long time. It kind of was born from a place where I had been doing conventions for several years as an artist, and a lot of my work is fan art. It's fan based popular culture
Right.
stuff, and it's stuff that I love. And I don't mind doing it.
Right.
But having conversations with artists, their thing is kind of like, that's great to kind of do that, but eventually you need your thing. You're going to need
Right.
your own thing. And for years it was, but I don't have a thing. Like I don't have a story that I want to tell,
Right.
and I didn't want to force it. So I was
Yeah.
sitting around and I was looking at other people's projects, and I'm always supporting other artists' projects, and going, oh well, that person took this idea and ran with it and made it into their brand.
Hmm.
What's kind of out there in the public domain, because I wanted my project to seem familiar to people, not completely out in left field. And I know in fantasy there's so many tropes and things that are
Yeah.
just so overplayed. I didn't want to just be another person who was like, I'm gonna do this thing with
Right.
dragons.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the dragon guy, because there's dragon guys everywhere, and they've done it so well that there's really no point
Right.
in taking it further.
Yeah.
And I started doing research into the origins of playing cards. So I watched hours and hours of documentary videos, YouTube. I did all this research into playing cards, and then how those branch into tarot, and how how there's
Yeah.
like all these different cultures have these slightly different variations on the playing card. And I'm like,
Sure.
well, playing cards is public domain. They're
Yeah.
1,000 years old or something. I don't remember when the first soldiers were looking for this game to play, when they couldn't carry games with them, so they
Right.
developed this whole system. And then what the suits were based on, and what the king and the queen of this suit and that suit. And I thought, what a really cool way to take that thing that's familiar and infuse my own fantasy world with that.
Sure. Yeah.
So the four cultures are kind of intermingled within the realm, and they all have different characteristics, and some of them can use magic and some of them can't. And we have this whole political structure, and
Hmm.
the whole social systems are different between the hearts and the clubs and the spades and the diamonds.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of a little bit of a background of the project itself. If you want to speak to what I gave you with the spades, a little snapshot of that, and then I found it interesting how you took those notes and sort of like fleshed them out and took
Sure.
them in a different direction, so you're able to bring a little bit of yourself to that. So do you want
Sure.
to speak to the spades specifically?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that we have that freedom as authors to collaborate that way, and sort of take the framework you had, um, and breathe life into it and sort of flesh it out into something even more. You kind of said, all right, so we have three suits because you already had the clubs. Somebody was already working on those.
Yeah.
And I let her pick first because I wasn't like, I knew what I wanted, but I didn't just want to be aggressive and jump on it, be like, that's, I'm going for the spades. So when she said I want to do the hearts, I was like, oh, okay, because I really want to do the spades. What I really liked about them is the sort of dark, mysterious, not necessarily evil bent to them, but sort of the not quite good. I would almost call them a dark gray area,
Hmm.
because they're definitely not um, all that great. And I liked that, and I loved the magic. The idea that the magic would have a price, but if I remember right, on the spades, you weren't quite sure how that was going to work. Like you'd already
Yeah.
determined that for the clubs,
It
their
was
magic
physical.
was going to be physical, right?
Hmm.
And I said, well,
Yeah.
it has to be different than that, but it
Yeah.
has to have a price. And so that's when I came up with the idea that the magic would corrupt them internally, corrupt their spirit, corrupt their morals, their ethics. But then I had to think of how would it do that? How and why would it do that? And that's when the idea of using the seven deadly sins, kind of came to mind. It's like, how would it corrupt them mentally without, I didn't want to go into like making them crazy or paranoid, or there are elements of that there, but I didn't really want to go into full blown like psychoses
Hmm.
and mental
Sure.
issues, because you can write that really wrong. And I didn't want to go that, I didn't want to go down that road.
Yeah.
Um, so that's where I thought, well, let's give them all a vice. Let's give them all one of the seven deadly sins that sort of demonstrates their mentality, or sort of makes them unique, and let's have the magic accentuate that. Let's make them more jealous or more angry or more,
Hmm.
lustful, or whatever it might be. So that was one of the aspects that I was really drawn to, is figuring out how the magic would work.
Yeah.
And the other thing I thought was really cool was when I'm pretty sure, did you had Ara and the Ace done, the Jack and the Ace done at that show,
So
right?
I had, yes, I had finished the Jack and the Ace
Okay,
at that show. So you already had a partial visual
right,
of the characters. That's kind of an interesting side note, is that when I started it, I started with the clubs, and the author of the clubs is actually my cousin, and she lives in Nevada. She I didn't know any writers, but I knew that she enjoyed writing in high school, and I've read some of the things that she had written in high school, and I was like, wow, this is really actually pretty good. And she reads a lot of fantasy, genre, science fiction. So I thought, if anybody, it's my cousin. If she tells me, F off, I'm not, this is stupid, then I'll just,
right.
whatever, the project would have never gotten anywhere. But I had done the Queen and the King, and no, actually I'd done all four. So I'd done all four visuals of the clubs, and I presented the project to her, and she was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And she fleshed out the characters, but she was working from visuals that were already complete.
Yeah,
In your situation, you are working from half of the visuals. In terms
right.
of what we're doing is I'm illustrating the face cards and the ace,
Yeah.
or so it would be the Jack, Queen, King, ace of each suit. So you're working from half of those. The
Hmm.
other two writers have no visuals.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, because I find myself having a harder time creating the visuals when they're coming up with the stories and characters first,
Oh,
which
really?
is interesting because I thought it would be easier. Part of what I was doing when I reached out to writers and wanting to collaborate in this way is I thought, well, this will take some of the visual storytelling off of me, and
Right.
I'll just be able to illustrate as if this is someone else's project. But it actually had the reverse effect,
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm reading what they have, and I'm like, I can't see it. Like
Oh,
I
wow.
can't
Okay.
see the characters because I'm reading them, and it's almost
Yeah.
like it's someone else's thing.
Yeah.
I'm really struggling with it. It's pretty interesting.
No, that's what I thought was, well, I'll touch on that in a second, but that was one of the things that drew me to was seeing Ara. I wanted to know, I wanted to know more about her the minute I saw her. And I think having her print at my first show, when I finally got the prints, like her and the Queen had been so eye-catching to everybody who walked by. I fell in love with her right away, um, and I wanted to know about her. I wanted to know, who is this person? And there was a lot that the art brought out immediately. The sword, how beautiful she was, the dress. It brought out a lot of like character right away. I wanted to know like why, and I wanted to know, why is the Jack a woman? So all of these story elements started boiling, just from that, just from like, why is the Jack a woman? Why has she got a sword? Why is she dressed that way? And right away, I'm like, okay, so, she's probably an assassin or spy, but she's got to be more than that. She's got to be a little more elegant than that. So that's where that character came from. But when I did go to the King and the Queen, the prints weren't done yet. I left a lot of visual out, intentionally. Normally when I build a character for my own writing, I have like a four section structure, and I'll set out what they look like, their appearance, just very straight up what they look like, what they normally wear, what their personality is, what their background is, and what their motivations are. And I intentionally left the appearance section of what I normally do when I sent it to you the first time, like completely blank. I didn't even fill those out for the king and queen, um, because I didn't want to railroad any specific visual interpretation. I would have rather had this story. And the only thing I think I did describe was the king having a beard, and you said no beard, so I took that out.
That was the
Um,
one piece.
yeah, which was exactly like that's the way collaboration should work.
Yeah.
But really, that was the only distinctive visual feature I think I gave either one of them right out of the gate. And then when I saw the prints, then I went back and modified some appearance things so that I was hoping that the story and personality might help inspire something in the art without giving you like this is what they look like, because I didn't want to be determining what they looked like so much
Yeah.
as what they were or who they were as characters.
It's interesting because if it was because I had kind of struggled through the first four, because it's a new thing, I didn't know the format, like how did I want these things to look? How were they going to work
Yeah,
as cards and all that, the other stuff that I had to deal with in terms of design issues. I
yeah,
didn't know if the spades went it more smoothly for me because they were the second ones that I've done, and I already got kind of went through the clubs,
right.
or I think it has more to do with what you're saying because the characters were their personalities, their flaws, their backstories. But in hindsight, looking back, you're right. There wasn't a lot of visual, and I kept looking for it to go. Well, I'm gonna make notes and say, well, she looks like this or he looks like that, and then I just kind of like I just was more absorbed into their personalities, and then
Yep.
what ended up coming out of that is the visuals that you see, which I think when I feel like I've read it so many times that it's hard. I know it's hard to read
Yeah,
it. You
yeah,
read this thing so many times, it's hard to have any sort of reaction. You're just like, you know
right.
it by heart, right? It's almost
Oh
like
yeah,
memorizing dialogue.
yeah,
But I feel like when people read it, my hope is that they'll see the characters and go, yes, that's how
yeah.
I see them as well.
I hope so. Yeah, I can say for sure when I saw, we obviously already had the first two done, but when I saw the king and the queen after having written them, yeah, I was like, that's it fit. It fit so perfectly when I saw them complete to the stories that I had written months before. Yeah, it was great. I think people really will see those characters in those in the images and in the stories, and I think they'll blend really well together. Uh, I'm curious to see how. I'm really excited to see how the rest of the sets turn out. I'm super excited to have mine done. I kind of feel bad because we're at the first show, and Ray was across the aisle from me down a ways, and she would just look over every once in a while, just shake her head, and she's like, "I just want mine."
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
what,
"I'm sorry, you picked the hearts."
right, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ray is the other author. She actually chose the diamonds. She chose the
Oh, right, right,
diamonds, and
diamonds.
then yeah, so she had been working on it, and we're kind of it. Everyone works differently. Like I think
Mhm.
writers and artists, like
Yeah.
people just think, well, most artists would do the same process or the same. It's all so different the process that we use, and
Yeah.
reading the writings of the different artists to me has been really fascinating just to see, even though this is the same project, the
Hmm.
different styles and the different, I don't know if that helps the project overall. To me, it makes it more interesting. You
I
got
think
these
it
four
will.
cultures that are all so different, and you have
Hmm.
different artistic voices in each one of them. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm hoping that will make it interesting to
I think
readers.
so. I think so. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The process is. I mean, I'm what they call a pantser. Um, I wouldn't sit down to write an outline if you made me. Um, and Ray, she plans. She has a schedule and a spreadsheet, and she's like, I work 3 hours on this book and then 2 hours on this story, and I have an outline. I'm like, that. I sit down with a pen and a piece of paper, and I just start going. I
Yeah,
can't. I don't know how she does it. I can't do it.
yeah.
Um, we are night and day when it comes to process. Uh, but yeah, I think that will be. I think the different voices, like you said, different cultures, different voices. I think it will make them more distinct.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times when, I mean, we read enough fantasy to know when you have the same author. I mean, there's some authors that I read that from book to book, all the characters even sound the same,
Mm.
even when they're completely different people from completely different worlds. And there's been a few authors that I've had to stop reading because
You
it
just
got
felt
to the
like you're
point.
like, I've heard this. I've been here
Yeah,
before, man. I don't need to hear this again.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that will help. It will avoid getting stuck in a rut of, you know, trying to write a different culture and trying, like right now, speaking of the process, I'm working on the novella for the Spades. So I want to like we got the first introduction with the short stories, the characters, and sort of introduces us to the characters and the story. Because I'm going to link right from, so anybody who reads the first collection of shorts, those are going to link right into the novellas. It's going to pick up within, I think, a year or so after the end of Edmund's story.
Okay.
I think Edmund's is the third one. Um,
Edmund,
Ca-
is
Jack,
is
Queen, King. Yeah, Edmund is the third
Edmund
one.
is the third one. Yeah.
Um, and it's going to start with Ara, and she's actually so part of the project. You wanted the cultures connected, and you wanted different elements of them to be linked together, so that it all felt like a one big world. So as a little preview, Ara is, she's a basically a street rat. She's not a noble. She doesn't have a lot of culture yet. She's basically really good at hiding. She's good with her hands. She's clever. She's ambitious, but she's got a lot to learn to be the Jack. And so the novella is going to open up with her learning at this school
Okay.
that is set up where the in the diamonds realm.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm trying to I'm taking notes from Ray, and I'm like, okay, so I gotta write a Spade in this school in the diamonds culture,
Hmm.
in a way that Ray has sort of created that culture, or what she has of it so far. And it's kind of interesting, so I'm hoping that I don't flub it up too much. I got to have her read the first chapter and be like, does this work? Because I don't know. I'm just flying by the seat of my pants right now,
Yeah.
hoping
Yeah.
that I make a good intro to this story, and then bring her back over to the Spades sort of realm,
Okay.
with knowledge. Uh, but that's part of one of the things I love about this too. This project is because I've also got to work on how is. I mean, we already know that Ara the Jack is connected to the clubs as well. So that's part of the story that I'm hoping to work through in this novella and bring the hearts into it, so that all those cultures revolving around each other and kind of connected to each other and feeding off of each other in a way in this rivalry that's going on. um, I'm hoping to sort of do all that within 30 to 40,000 words or so. We'll see. I
Yeah.
have a hard time writing. I write short stories and I write long fiction. When I got to write it in between, that's I tend to just keep going, and I've got to rein myself
I
in
think
a little
the
bit.
cool part is that if as long as you stay out in the lead, you can make it whatever you want, and then everyone else has to has to play into your hands. You're like, no, no, these
Yeah,
are going to be really long
yeah.
stories.
There we go. We'll just
Um,
write a whole novel.
yeah, I don't remember. Did you read the clubs? Have you
No,
read it?
not yet.
You
Not
haven't
yet.
read? Okay,
I read part of. I think part of you sent me part of where Ara was
okay,
with them, and that was all I had.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's going to be a thing too that we can explore is how much of each other's pieces do you want to know about? Like,
Right.
so I think some writers would be like, no, no, I don't want to know any of it, and others would be like, I need to know everything because
Yeah.
that's how, that's the true collaboration. So
Right.
yeah, I would, I will open that up, and it made me think that I need to reach out to the other writers and say, hey, if you want to read this so that you can kind of,
Sure.
you can kind of work with each other. It's like one big sandbox where everybody's kind of doing their thing.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I'm always thinking about the project. It's always kind of this thing in the back of my mind, and I'm like, I got to get back into that, and I've got to do another piece. And once I get rolling on one of them, I'm
Hmm.
locked in, and I have to
Yeah,
finish it. Um,
yeah,
but to get to that point where I'm ready to do it
yeah.
is a lot of, it's like plodding through the mud of just like, I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
like no, not this or not that. And yeah, and I also I'm looking at the stuff now, and one of the dangers in having a project that goes on for a really long time is when I look at my artwork over time, I start to grow to hate it.
Yeah.
When I look back at old things that I've done, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that works anymore. I don't know if I'm going to get to a point where I'm going to just want to repaint these or polish them or change them in some ways. I don't mean like the characters themselves, but I mean like that like definitive portrait piece that we've been
Right.
going off of. And I've also thought, do I want to start painting the worlds? Do I want to start painting interactions? Do I want to start getting into that and unwrapping all this stuff that's
Yeah.
that's out there. And then as soon as I find myself thinking about that, I'm like, no, it's just too much. Like I can't even like my brain's gonna explode. And
Yeah.
it,
It's very that's very similar for us. I have a notebook full of story ideas and snippets, and oh, this would be a cool story, and I write it down, and oh, this would be a fun idea, and I write it down. And sometimes I'll pull those into things I'm already working on, like, oh, that'd be a cool scene. Now
mm,
I'll just change it to fit what I'm working on. But in the same way, like I go back and I mean, for an author, you write a book and you read that book a dozen times before you publish it. And then
mhm.
you think about that book for years after you publish it. And it's the same way. It's like my first novel, everybody I talk to loves my first novel. I think it's the most boring thing I've ever read, but it's because I've read it a dozen
Yeah,
times,
because
you
it
know?
would be after you read it that many times. Absolutely.
And so it's like, I'm so glad that people love it. I really appreciate the feedback I get from it. But I look at it and I go, I can't wait to write something else because like I want to move on. So writing this and then writing my other novel and writing the short stories, I'm always bouncing from one project to another just to keep things interesting.
We got to get it out there in front of as many people as possible, and then hopefully
Yeah.
it just kind of spreads. People
Yeah.
are looking for things to read now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Looking for things to read. And I think what we have is something very unique. I really do think we're breaking new ground, not only in how a collaborative project is managed, but in this type of project. Like you said, you know, artists never come to authors and say, "Can you write this character for me?" Um, it's just unheard of. It's always either comic books and graphic novels as sort of a 50-50 collaboration, or it's authors going to artists and saying, "Please draw this for me. Here's $1,000."
Yeah.
And so it's really unique the way we're doing it. And then based on shared world, like I've studied shared world writing for a long time because forever I wanted to write for TSR. I wanted to write Dungeons and Dragons novels when I was a kid, right? And shared worlds are not something that's easy to do because the publisher owns everything. You don't own squat.
Hmm.
And so you get paid whatever they decide to pay you. And some people really got hosed back in the day. Margaret Rice and Tracy Hickman are my favorite authors and wrote the
Hmm.
Dragonlance saga,
Yeah.
and they don't own any of it. They don't
Right.
own the characters. They don't nothing. They can't republish nothing. And to me, that
Yeah.
breaks my heart because they created one of in my opinion, one of the best fantasy worlds ever, and some of the most memorable characters that I've ever read, and it's all owned by a major corporation that would never let them do whatever they want with their own creation. That just breaks my heart as a writer. Um, so I think the way we're doing this, I, I I don't think this would work on a grand scale. I think if you got the wrong person involved, it would fall apart so fast.
Yeah. That's been one of the things that people have mentioned to me that are kind of in the know in those in
Mhm.
those certain markets. Um, a lot of them, when I mentioned to them what I was doing, they said, "You're crazy. I don't. What are
Yeah.
you What are you doing?" Like you don't do that. You don't
Yeah,
go and
right.
you could trust people and this and this and that. And my whole thing was the project would never go anywhere if
Yeah,
I didn't bring in the people that I brought in. It would not be where it is right now. I would have
yeah,
never followed through. I would have gotten 3 paintings into this, and I would have moved on to something else and gotten bored
yeah,
with it or distracted, and it would have never gone anywhere. I would have never
right.
written any of these things, and I really want to see the project come to fruition. I want to see it completed. It
Yes.
might take a long time, but it's something that I want to see through to the end.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is difficult, and it's interesting when you say that those Mar- uh, Margaret, what is it? Margaret Weiss, Tracy
Margaret
Hickman,
Weiss and Tracy
Tracy Hickman.
Hickman. Yeah.
Those were some of the first fantasy books that I ever read when I was
Yeah.
when I was young. I picked up those, and I read all of the Dragonlance books,
Yeah.
and it's funny because those are your favorite authors.
Hmm.
My favorite painter was Larry Elmore, who
Oh,
did the
yes.
cover of those books,
Oh,
which
yes.
is why I became an artist because
Yes.
of those books and the cover paintings of
Yeah.
those books. Um,
Yeah.
so,
Oh,
you know,
Larry.
it's like kindred spirits too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when you're saying like the whole idea of the publishers owning all the rights and the people getting hosed, that's been the MO for a lot of the industries,
Hmm.
including comic books. I mean,
Oh,
that's why
yeah.
the whole Image Comics thing happened in the 90s, where
Yeah.
all the big names spun off and started their own thing, and they left Marvel and DC and
Yep.
these big companies and said we're owning the rights to our own characters,
Yeah.
and that was unheard of. We're
Right.
kind of doing the equivalent of that through this project
Yeah.
in a very
Yeah.
small scale.
Right. And speaking of somebody who does dragons, like I don't think anybody's going to top Elmore when it comes to that. Um, but I have Death of Sturm is above my mantle.
Hmm.
Obviously, a print
Yeah,
of the Death
yeah.
of Sturm. But when I bought that, I talked to him. And so back when he painted those covers, those favorite covers that got us hooked on our favorite books, they basically got paid nothing. He said he sold the Death of Sturm for a sword he could hang on the wall. And
Hmm.
now that painting's worth 3 grand. It's hanging in some guy's collection.
Wow.
Um, but back when he painted it for the cover, like it wasn't worth anything as a
Mm-mm.
painting. He got paid whatever TSR paid him for it, and then he traded it for a sword. Because back then, that's what you did, and
Yeah.
and to think that companies, as much as I love what TSR produced, or as much as I love what Marvel produced, those companies took advantage of people. Um, but I think part of it was because they didn't know how to handle something like this. I mean, you've got to, but comic books, for example, you get together a writer and an artist and a color and inker and a letterer and an editor. Who owns the rights to the character? Is it the guy who drew it or the guy who wrote it?
Been many battles
Right.
that have taken place around those types of scenarios.
Yeah. So I think part of it was out of just they didn't know how to do it, but part of it was they wanted to make money. And the easiest way to make money was to get these people to sign contracts that weren't necessarily in their best interest and take advantage of that.
And I mean, that's just the way things were done. So they
Yeah.
didn't know what they were doing, and a lot of it wasn't from a place of them being the evil empire that
Right.
was taken. It was work for hire.
Right.
Like how are you going to make money as an artist back in the day when that stuff was happening? Those
Right.
guys were happy to roll up and be like, wait, you're gonna pay my rent money and you're gonna let me
Yeah.
paint dragons?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
nowadays, people don't really think. They go to a con and you see hundreds of artists and
Right.
writers and people that are making a living with their creative properties.
Right.
That wasn't the way
No.
that was going on. You were just, this is what I do, and I've got to
Yeah.
eat. So okay, that pays $100. I
Right.
guess that pays $100.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting.
Right. But yeah, I think we might. I have a feeling that we might be setting new ground or setting a new standard, at least for a smaller scale. I
Mhm.
don't think this would work on a Marvel size scale or a Wizard of the Coast size scale, but
Yeah,
on
I
something
mean, well,
small
because
like this.
if you look at it, you're talking about having to have publicity machine that is a multi-million, multi-billion dollar
Hmm.
company, right?
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're never going to be able to reach that kind of an audience.
Right.
So if we did, if that's why people will have a publisher, right? If someone
Right.
did say we want to publish a thing, then we would be putting ourselves in a position where we're like, we're just like everybody else at this point.
Yeah.
Take it away, and
Yeah.
you might end up, everybody might end up doing pretty well. It's happened,
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm okay with that. And my whole thing from the beginning was my hesitation to present it to you guys as writers was, well, I want to make sure that everybody gets compensated fairly. Like you
Right.
all have my thing is, you could take this as far as you want. If
Hmm.
you are able to reach a large audience and you sell 10,000 copies of the book,
Oh,
I'll be
that'd
like,
be nice.
yeah, that's awesome, man. Like,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Right.
I'm not gonna have my hands out and be like, well, can I, I need a
Right.
piece of that, right?
Yeah.
So if people want to hustle and they want to get out there and they want to, make it happen,
Yeah.
we're all gonna reap the rewards of that, because
Right.
there's gonna be a ripple effect.
Yeah.
If anybody does do that, if you did sell 10,000 copies, I guarantee I would sell a couple of paintings.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you
Without a
know,
doubt.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like people will be like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
Because
I'll take some of those.
we are in a market. I mean, I'm a geek. I'm a collector. There's shelves full of books back there that I barely touch because we've got to have it all.
Right.
I got a basement full of Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and every book I bought was because, well, I just got to have that one.
Yeah.
I may not even open it. I've
No,
just got to
but
have
it's
it.
there, and
Yeah.
I've got to have it.
Yeah. So we've got to have everything. So if we get into something that we like or a series that we like, we just keep buying it because we got to have it all. And I don't want to say that in a way that I'm like, we're getting them because we know that's how they work, but we're also feeding that desire with hopefully great content. So far, what I've seen with the art has been fantastic. I hope people like the writing. Um, and so I think we're feeding that need, which is obviously there, and nobody's going to deny that that's just how geeks are.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, we're providing value.
yeah,
Somebody's got to give them something to get. Well, I appreciate it, man. It was great talking to you and catching
yeah,
up and talking shop, and
definitely.
you know we'll we'll have to we'll have to set something up to periodically. Who knows how things are gonna you know turn around, or when things
Yeah,
go back to the old normal.
right. Yeah,
Which part of me is not looking forward to going back to the old normal. I'm kind of like, wait, why? Why do we need to go back? Some
yeah,
things are actually better in this way. I mean, I'm not saying I'm 100% all about,
yeah.
all of it, but there's been some positives I'd like to hold on to, at
There
least for
have
a
been.
little while before,
Yeah.
getting back on in the rat race.
Thanks for watching. Like, there's like a little button that they put on the laptop or something, and then they say click it, and then you can never even miss a video.
That's if you subscribe.